47th floor strategic boardroom of Wexler Global was drenched in the sterile silence of a break, as if all the air had been sucked out by an invisible storm. On the whiteboard by the wall, red marker scrawls twisted into a tangled mess. Financial leak. Misallocation. Estimated loss. On 100. A puzzle so complex that even the finest financial, investment, and tech minds in New York had come up empty. For the past 3 hours, all eyes had stared into that board as if staring into an abyss. No one spoke. No solution emerged. The meeting paused. Half-drunk coffee cups grew cold. The pressure hung in the air like a blade. Then the door creaked open. Geneva Green, a black janitor in her 40s, entered with a rickety steel cart and a plastic bag of empty bottles. She wore a faded gray-blue uniform, worn-out flats, and a torn ivory rubber glove on her right hand. Her weathered face was kind, her gaze cautious, as if afraid her very glance scratched the polished floors. Following her was her daughter, Talia Green, age 10, a skinny black girl with tightly braided hair tied with red fabric string. Her cloth backpack was hand-stitched with a cat, her shoes old and worn, but her curious eyes sparkled, and she was very well behaved. The public library was closed that morning, so Geneva had no choice but to bring her child along for the morning shift. "I'm just grabbing the bottles real quick, then we're leaving," Geneva whispered, eyes scanning the room nervously. Talia nodded, sitting quietly at the far end of the boardroom table. The room exuded a luxury silence that felt cold. She looked around until her eyes landed on the whiteboard. The numbers, the symbols, a plus sign written as a minus. A broken equation. Talia frowned. "Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us." Because she understood what was wrong with the math on that board. Those numbers, unlike the stares of grown-ups, didn't frighten her. They were just Lego blocks waiting to be put in the right order. She tiptoed forward and picked up a green marker lying beneath the board. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes shone bright. Carefully, slowly, she erased a wrong line, rewrote the simplified formula, distributed terms properly, and added a handwritten note beneath, in lowercase. "Reverse track quarterly dip. 4-cycle recall." Just then, the door burst open. The sharp clack of heels echoed like thunder. Rebecca Cartwright, Wexler's CFO, stepped in. A white woman in her early 50s, platinum hair tightly tied, tall and razor-thin. Her pale blue eyes cold as glass, her mouth rarely curved into a smile. She had returned to retrieve the phone she left behind. When she opened the door, she froze. Before her stood a black child, marker in hand, standing at the sacred whiteboard of Wexler's war room, writing on the puzzle that had paralyzed an entire company. Rebecca took a step forward, more out of fury than fear of a breach. "What the hell is this?" she barked. Talia jumped and dropped the marker. I'm sorry, I just saw the top line was flipped wrong. I only changed a little." Rebecca froze for a beat. Her eyes scanned the board. She read the child's writing. The phrasing was clear. The logic, flawless. Not just that, it was terrifyingly accurate. "Reverse track quarterly dip," she murmured, as if punched in the chest. But her expression quickly turned ice cold again. "Who are you?" she shouted, her confusion snapping into rage. "Who allowed you low-life black people in here to tamper with this?" Geneva ran forward, clutching the bag of bottles, face pale. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. She didn't mean any harm. I was just cleaning this floor." And she got curious when she saw the board. "She meant no harm." Rebecca turned sharply, face flushed red with anger. "Harm? Do you realize this child just tampered with the company's emergency financial board? Do you have any idea how much confidential data is being analyzed here? Who gave a black brat with no education permission to draw all over $100 million asset of my company?" Talia stood frozen, eyes brimming with tears. Geneva wrapped her arms around her daughter, bowing her head as she sobbed. "Please, just forgive us. We'll leave right now." Rebecca had already pulled out her phone. "Security. Now. I want these 2 filthy black rats out of this building immediately." permanently. Minutes later, 2 uniformed guards appeared, faces hard as steel. They didn't ask questions. They didn't listen. Geneva and Talia were escorted out like unnamed shadows. Talia looked back, eyes still wet. The whiteboard behind her, where her solution still shone clear, stood untouched, a silent testament. No one bothered to see. 15 minutes later, members of the board and executive team began returning to the 47th floor war room. The air remained as thick as when they had left, but under the cool LED lights, the familiar whiteboard somehow looked clearer. And then, they all froze. Some walked closer, eyes narrowing at the green handwriting in the corner of the board. "Wait, is this a new solution?" someone asked. "Hold on, let me cross-check the formula." The more they read, the more their faces changed. The function had been correctly reduced. The reverse cash flow cycle treated according to IFRS 9, internal variables eliminated to form a self-stabilizing matrix. The entire problem, the capital allocation leak that had paralyzed the company for days, now sat neatly distilled into 3 clean, elegant lines. "My God, who wrote this?" gasped the director of investments. Just then, Rebecca Cartwright walked in, hair perfectly tied, silk tie in royal purple, not a wrinkle out of place, and a smile the first seen on her face in years. Soft as velvet, but sharp as a blade. "I did," she said coolly. "I came back during the break and somehow it all just clicked." All eyes turned to her, a moment of stunned silence. Then someone clapped and the room erupted. "Rebecca, how the hell did you do it? Absolutely brilliant. Incredible. You're a treasure to Lexford." Graham Winslow, the bald, broad-shouldered CEO with titanium glasses, slammed his hand on the table. "Rebecca, you just saved us from the biggest financial meltdown in a decade. I'm not exaggerating. You just pulled back $100 million from the brink." The room's energy shifted. No longer just colleagues, but admiration. Not just leadership, but reverence. The once cold, distant CFO now gleamed in the eyes of everyone. "We need to submit a special promotion recommendation," one exec suggested. "Or equity bonus, at the very least." Rebecca raised her hand in modesty, but her eyes glimmered with unmistakable triumph. And then, as if remembering something terribly important, she turned to the CEO. "By the way, I need to report a serious policy violation." The room quieted instantly. While I was solving the equation here alone, a black janitor and what I assume was her black daughter trespassed into this room. The child scribbled nonsense across our strategy board. People exchanged glances. She continued. "I was about to remove them, but when I saw the board, I regret to say, it was staged. They clearly planned it. An attempt to create a hero moment, possibly for extortion or sabotage. We must act firmly." Whispers began to spread. Some nodded. Others frowned. "You're certain it was intentional?" asked the CEO. "Absolutely," Rebecca replied coldly. "This is something our elite team has struggled with for days, and some random black child just happens to write this on the board. She probably copied it from somewhere. I suspect there's someone behind this, trying to create a scandal or blackmail the firm." By the end of the meeting, Geneva Green and her daughter were terminated. No announcement, no investigation. Just a quiet internal memo, and their employee records vanished from the system, as if they'd never existed. 1 week later, in a small park behind an old Harlem church, Geneva Green and Talia slept on a wooden bench coated in morning dew. They survived on charity food, stale bread, and the occasional warm drink from a kind cafe owner. That incident had shattered everything. No money, no home, nothing left. Their belongings fit in a single bag, a few worn clothes, one thin pillow, and Talia's workbook, water-stained from the rain, but still clutched tightly to her chest. "I'm okay, Mom," Talia whispered, leaning on her mother's shoulder. "No, you're not," Geneva murmured, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry I let this happen to you." No one believed them. No one listened. And the name Geneva Green had become a red mark in Lexford's internal records. After 2 weeks of living like ghosts in the city's shadow, Geneva made a choice, not to beg for a job, but to speak the truth. They had nothing left to lose, nothing left to fear. They stood in the corporate plaza of Lexford, holding a cardboard sign. My daughter solved the equation. We demand the truth be acknowledged. People passed by with brief glances and scornful smirks. Here we go again. Another performance? Sad. But the theatrics never end. Just more black drama. Trying to go viral, huh? Some younger staff filmed them snapping pictures to post on the company's internal chat with mocking captions. Black janitor drama poop 2. Savior or storyteller? No one asked how Talia knew the answer. No one believed a black janitor's daughter could understand, let alone solve a $100 million equation. To them, the truth had already been signed by someone white, with a title. And the rest? Just trash on the margins. Exactly how they'd always described Geneva behind her back. Night had fallen on sub-level 3 of the Lexford and Hale parking structure. A level of silence so unnatural it felt like the air had been vacuumed out. The hallway lights flickered. The ventilation hummed like the breath of some hidden beast lurking in the dark. In the corner, Rebecca Cartwright's sleek black BMW sat polished and pristine, cold and clinical, much like its owner. But tonight, Rebecca didn't know someone was waiting for her in the shadows. Was it the mother and daughter? No, it was Edward Morris, head of investments at the firm. A tall, broad white man with salt and pepper hair, usually slicked back in tailored Italian suits, now wearing an old sports jacket, lurking behind a concrete pillar, a glint of fury in his eyes. Weeks earlier, when the company's financial data leak was publicly blamed on a system glitch, Edward had breathed a sigh of relief, because he was the architect behind the operation. The missing $100 million had been siphoned off via deliberate misallocation errors and hidden in offshore shell accounts routed through shadowy Cayman funds. Everything was going smoothly until the equation got solved. And worse, the credit went to Rebecca. That so-called solution didn't just plug the hole. It destroyed every backdoor exit Edward had spent 6 months building. His power was now suspended pending review. His future under threat. And worst of all, he didn't believe for 1 second that Rebecca had cracked it. But in front of the board, she had taken all the credit. Now, Edward had one option left: force her to reopen the breach. As Rebecca unlocked her car and tossed her bag into the passenger seat, smash! Something hard slammed into her side mirror. She spun around just as a rough hand clamped around her neck and slammed her back against the car. "Edward? What are you doing?" Rebecca gasped. His face was inches from hers, reeking of old tobacco and rage. "Don't play dumb with me. What the hell did you do to the system? I designed that path perfectly, and then you came in with your bullshit solution and sealed it shut." I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, visibly shaken. She had never faced this kind of raw violence from a colleague, or rather, a predator. "Cut the act, Cartwright. You wrote the damn solution. You rerouted the entire cash flow system. I want you to open it back up. Now." "I can't. I didn't write it. I'm not the one who solved it." Edward froze. "What? It was a little black girl, the janitor's daughter. I saw her write it on the board. I panicked. I took credit. I couldn't risk losing everything. But it was her. It was that girl. Go find her if you want your goddamn breach back." He stared at her. For a second, it didn't compute. "You expect me to believe that? A f***ing black girl, 10 years old, solved a $100 million problem. Do I look that stupid to you? I swear, I kicked them out. I framed them, but I swear on my life, I didn't write that solution. I can't reopen it. Please don't kill me. Please." Her voice broke into frantic sobs. The cold garage echoed her screams like a siren of looming violence. But what neither of them knew was that just beyond the garbage chute by the emergency stairwell wall, 2 small figures were curled up on the ground, barely waking from sleep. Geneva and Talia. They had wandered into the shopping center nearby to search for leftovers, and ended up falling asleep in the emergency exit corridor, exhausted. Talia gripped her mother's hand tightly. "Mom, that's her. That's Cartwright." Geneva froze. Then, Edward's furious roar split the air. No more talking. Won't reopen it, then die. Talia's body tensed in fear. Geneva, in a single breath, snapped into motion. One hand gripped her old phone, already recording. The other clutched her daughter close. Across the lot, Edward pulled something from his jacket. A steel tool with a sharpened point. His eyes burned, not with reason, but with the animal panic of a predator cornered. Rebecca was shaking violently. Please, I told you everything. I can't help you. Please, just let me go. As Edward raised the weapon, a voice rang out like lightning. Stop. Geneva burst from the shadows, slamming into Edward with a primal force she didn't know she had. Who the hell are you? Edward bellowed, staggering. I'm the mother of the girl you're about to scapegoat, and I've recorded every damn word of your confession. Every last word. Behind her, Talia held up the phone, hands trembling, its red light blinking, still recording. Edward went pale. In a flash, he lunged, but Talia screamed. The police are coming. I already called them. Don't you dare move again. A silence stretched so taut it might snap. Edward's breath grew ragged. He slowly dropped the weapon. His hands shook. Rebecca collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Moments later, sirens pierced the air. Red and blue lights bounced off the concrete walls. Police stormed in. Geneva handed over the phone, its video still running. She said nothing else. Rebecca, glassy-eyed, simply nodded. Edward Morris was restrained, still thrashing, still screaming, but completely powerless now. The 40th floor boardroom, once a battleground for fierce negotiations between multinational giants, now felt more like a cathedral, silent, reverent, heavy with the scent of truth, rather than perfume or coffee. On the giant screen, the grainy video from Geneva Green's old phone played before an audience of board executives, legal advisors, shareholder reps, and uniformed officers. The voice of Edward Morris, head of investments, echoed across the cold, sterile room. You kidding me? A little black girl, 9, 10 years old? If she solved that equation, I'll go find her myself. You're the one who rewrote the solution, aren't you? I want you to reopen the breach right now. I can't. I didn't solve it. It was that black janitor's daughter who did. Every word. Clear. Undeniable. At the far end of the room, Rebecca Cartwright sat hunched over, clutching the hem of her blazer, as if trying to hold on to the last thread of authority. Her once perfect platinum hair was tangled, makeup streaked. She was no longer the symbol of control, just a woman, stripped bare between ambition and disgrace. Edward Morris, pale and stone-faced, was cuffed and escorted out immediately after the meeting. Charges: embezzlement, deliberate sabotage of internal systems, criminal threats, obstruction of justice. He now faced a serious criminal trial. When the police asked, "Do you have anything to say?" Edward said nothing. He looked at Geneva and Talia, no longer with contempt, but something closer to resignation. Truth, it seemed, was the only force that power and money could not erase. That afternoon, CEO Graham Winslow convened an emergency all-hands meeting, unprecedented in company history. Over 300 employees from every department, both in person and online, were asked to attend. When Graham stepped onto the stage, he wasn't wearing his usual glasses. His face looked tired but resolute. There are days in a company's history that are remembered not because of numbers, he began, voice calm and firm, but because of people. Today, I'm not here to talk about the breach that was sealed. I'm not here to talk about the $100 million we saved. I'm here to apologize, because we threw out the very person who saved our future. He paused, looked the crowd in the eyes. That little girl, Talia Green, is 10 years old, the daughter of a janitor who was mocked, fired, and humiliated inside this very building. But she's the one who solved the equation that stumped our engineers, consultants, and financial analysts for 3 straight days. A murmur rippled across the room. Some bowed their heads. Some eyes welled up. We believed that only those with degrees, titles, and tailored suits deserved to be heard. But today, Talia Green taught us something else. Worth isn't in the color of your skin. It isn't in your job title. It's in your mind and in your integrity. Another pause. And then, on behalf of the entire executive board, I offer our deepest apology to Geneva Green and her daughter for the injustice they endured. And I hereby declare that the name Talia Green will be entered in Lexford's Book of Honor as the person who saved this company from losing the applause that followed wasn't ceremonial. It was cleansing. A wave of truth finally being called by its name. Talia received a special scholarship, personally approved by the CEO, granting her access to the National Academy of Young Scientists. At the award ceremony, the girl stood on stage, still in a simple white dress, her braids neat, her voice small but clear. I'm not smarter than anyone, I just like numbers. And I thought, if I saw a way from point A to point B, maybe I should draw it out, even if no one believed me. A math graduate from Yale, sitting in the front row, quietly wiped away tears. Geneva Green was offered full reinstatement with full benefits and back pay. She respectfully declined. I don't hate this company, she said, but I want to build something that's real for me. She opened a small stall selling handmade goods, embroidered tote bags, knitted scarves, and handwritten cards with simple math formulas for underprivileged kids. Strangely, within weeks the stall became a quiet phenomenon. People didn't queue for the products. They queued for the story. For the woman who had once been humiliated, but who still stood in front of her attacker to protect the one who had betrayed her. 1 year later, at the Voices That Inspire America ceremony, hosted by the National Education Foundation, Talia Green's name was called alongside renowned leaders and changemakers. Still in her modest white dress, she walked to the podium, bowed, and said, "People shouldn't be judged by what they wear or where they sit, but by how they stand when no one else stands with them. I don't blame the people who kicked my mom and me out. I just hope that next time, someone will choose to listen instead of pushing us away." The auditorium rose in a standing ovation, long, unbroken. The girl once called a black nobody, once kicked out of a strategy room, once curled beneath a bus stop in the rain, was now the nation's youngest delegate to the International Genius Youth Forum, and the woman who once picked up trash in silence now walked through crowds with her head high and her smile calm, knowing this: justice never comes early, but it never loses its way. Justice doesn't always knock at the right time, but it will come if we're brave enough to hold the truth in our trembling hands. Titles don't define intelligence, and status can never replace courage. In a world loud with noise and prejudice, sometimes the quietest voice is the one that most needs to be heard.